Hi, I'm Shaurya. I make videos on people and events, both historical and contemporary. I particularly wanted to make this video due to the geopolitical changes happening in the world right now. Let's get started. After the fall of the Berlin Wall on November 9th, 1989, and subsequently the dissolution of the Soviet Union, Francis Fukuyama suggested that these events had led to the end of history, as liberal democracy had finally defeated all the remnants of absolutism, and that there were no other political ideologies that could compete against or challenge liberal democracy. On a side note, the end of history is a political and philosophical concept that supposes that a particular political, economic, or social system may develop that would constitute the endpoint of humanity's socio-cultural evolution and would be the final form of human government, an idea first conceptualized by German philosopher Georg Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel. The end of history doesn't mean events will just stop happening. Francis Fukuyama argues that liberal democracy is the form of government which most satisfies human needs. 3 decades later, more than ever, liberal democracy is challenged by authoritarianism and populism, especially with the rise of the authoritarian regime of China and Xi Jinping, and the totalitarian regime of Putin, who are instrumental in dismantling the post-World War II world order. The populist ideologies of far-right governments have contributed to the erosion and dismantling of liberal democratic institutions seen in the shining city on the hill during Trump's administration. These populist governments tend to have inward-looking policies that prioritize national interests over international cooperation. Cumulatively, these have direct consequences to the global order that was set up after 1945. Now, you may be wondering why the surge of populist ideologies is a bad thing. Liberal markets are only made possible because of material desires of humans, and the democratic recognition is only made possible because of immaterial desires of humans. Francis Fukuyama argues that these two are the pillars of human nature. The needs of the combination of free markets and political recognition are only fulfilled by liberal democracy. Technically, this means that a byproduct of liberal democracy is it lifts less economically developed countries from poverty. An example of this is South Korea. After transitioning to a liberal democracy in the late 20th century, South Korea experienced huge economic growth as the country implemented market-oriented economic policies, invested heavily in education and technology, and reduced corruption, all of which was made possible by the regime of liberal democracy along with good governance. On the other hand, in comparison to South Korea, Venezuela, once considered a successful democracy in Latin America, has experienced a decade of democracy, with Hugo Chavez dismantling the democracy, and in more recent years, Nicolas Maduro marking a turning point in the country's history. According to the U.S. State Department, on January 10th, 2019, Nicolas Maduro illegally claimed the presidency of Venezuela despite global condemnation of a rigged election. As he had done for years to retain the power, Maduro manipulated the electoral process and timeline to his advantage. Venezuela's decline into authoritarianism has inevitably led to many consequences, one of them being the deteriorating economy that has hyperinflation and a shortage of basic goods. A key factor in causing this is political corruption within the authoritative government. After the implementation of the socialism of the 21st century, started by Hugo Chavez and carried on by Nicolas Maduro, according to the IMF, the GDP of Venezuela dropped from $372.59 billion in 2012 to an expected $96.93 billion by the end of 2023. In contrast, South Korea's GDP grew from $1,278 billion in 2012 to $1,721.9 billion in 2023. In conclusion, the end of history means that liberal democracy is where humans are intended to be. There is no better form of government. However, with competing ideologies such as the rise of populism and China's communism with capitalist market, it would be interesting to see how history actually ends. On the same note, could history also end because of the clash of civilization, as written by Samuel Huntington? What are your thoughts? The next video that I am going to make is going to be about the clash of civilization.